you doing? I'm Nate, and I'm going to be your narrator this Valentine's Day. I thought we'd do something a little special, So I've got a couple of stories that we're going to cover today. It's going to be really nice. It's a different perspective on Valentine's Day. Just a kind of spook factor. I think that's always kind of fun. It's what we kind of do here. For those of you that are new, enjoy. A random woman on the street gave me a Valentine's Day card. I wish I hadn't opened it. It read, "Will you be mine?" There was no name, no one to whom it had originally addressed, just a crumpled red envelope and a mostly blank white card, with the aforementioned question written inside on the right. The black ink had smeared, either at the time of writing or sometime during its travels through the curious woman's pocket. It somehow made the question seem sad, desperate. She gave me one last glance, then stepped away, mingling with the crowd that seemed to appear from out of nowhere at that very moment. I didn't know what to do, and had anyone else given it to me, I probably would have tossed it. But the woman had been strangely, unconventionally attractive, so I kept it. I used it to buoy my spirits after what had been a particularly frustrating day at work. She could have given it to anyone, but she'd chosen me. Back home, I set it on the kitchen counter, and started to make myself something to eat. A few minutes into dinner preparations, I got this feeling in the back of my neck, like there was someone watching me. Turning around, I scanned my small apartment, able to see the entirety of the kitchen and the living room beyond from where I was standing at the stove. There wasn't anyone in sight, and yet I still felt as if I were being observed. It was around 8 p.m. Night had already set in, but my living room curtains were still open. I crossed the room, closed them, and returned to the kitchen. The ominous feeling lingered, but I ignored it and finished cooking. Halfway through eating dinner, there was a knock at the door. I'd never had anyone stop by to visit before, so the occurrence was at once alarming. I sat there, frozen mid-chew, hoping that there'd been some kind of mistake. But another knock came. Rising from the table, I gripped my fork in my hand and crept toward the front door, trying not to announce my occupancy of the apartment. Reaching the door, I peered through the peephole, not exactly dreading what I'd see, but hoping not to see anyone. My hope panned out. There wasn't anyone there, and yet this unnerved me, because I hadn't heard any departing footsteps. Carefully, fork gripped tightly in my right hand, I opened the door an inch. No one occupied the space beyond, so I opened it all the way. The threshold was empty. Both ends of the hall were empty. I didn't notice the evidence that anyone had even been there until I took a tentative step into the hall. Turning around to re-enter my apartment, I saw that someone had written something on the door. An unsettlingly familiar phrase. "Will you be mine?" And just like the ink in the card, the writing, dark paint, I hoped, was smeared. The letter E in mine, no more than a trailing blot. I hurried back inside and slammed the door. My heart was going crazy. I sensed that something was happening, that I was being subjected to some kind of prank or harassment. I had to hold on to the wall as I made my way back to the kitchen, my anxiety making my steps unsteady. As I returned to my seat at the table, my appetite utterly lost, I was suddenly beset with the urge to look at the card again, to read it again, even though I knew what was written inside. I went over, grabbed it from the counter, and sat back down, shoving my unwanted dinner aside. I withdrew the card from its envelope and set it on the table, a feeling of mounting unrest making my hands tremble. The blank white face of the card seemed to augur some terrible yet unguessable news, an infinite array of cryptic possibilities. Finally, I willed my hands to open the card. Inside, written on every single inch of space, was the phrase, "Will you be mine?" Over and over, in every direction, some instances more erratic than others. There was a terrible and terrifying variety to the scribblings. I'd never felt more disturbed by such a relatively simple thing. Will you be mine? Will you be mine? Will you be mine? I threw the card away, but after a few moments spent on the couch trying to calm myself, I got up, fetched my candle lighter, and burned the card in the kitchen sink. As the flames consumed it, crumbling and blackening the material, I felt a new sensation. Not exactly nausea, but a bodily lightness. I gripped the counter, attempting to steady myself. It wasn't until I had practically keeled over that I noticed the fumes weren't grey or black or the color of any smoke I'd seen before, but red. As red as the envelope the card had been in. Consciousness began to ebb away just as I heard the front door open. I remembered then that I hadn't locked the door. I'd merely slammed it in my panic. You idiot, I thought to myself as darkness took me. I awoke on my kitchen table, and the first thing I noticed was the chill. I was naked. Had been stripped completely. Given the circumstances, as terrible as they were, I expected to be bound, but I was not, and promptly rolled off the table when I shifted my weight. I landed hard on my shoulder and briefly hoped that I'd pass out again, if only to stop the flare of pain. Recovering, using the table for leverage, I stood up. My senses were rekindled completely when I saw what was smeared on the table's surface. It was, unmistakably, blood. My blood. As if activated by the sight, my nerves exploded and pain coursed down the front of my body. I fell to my knees, my body overwrought with agony. With one eye open, the other closed, as if that'd somehow mollify the pain, I examined myself. From the top of my chest, all the way down to my groin, was the word, mine, carved into my skin, as erratically as the darkly enigmatic question in the card. It was like I had been claimed, the word lacking a question mark, the wounds, still fresh, a grisly statement of ownership. Every movement, no matter how subtle, brought a new spike of breath-stealing pain, so I just stayed there, kneeling on my kitchen floor, as errant streams of blood trickled from the wounds that had not yet coagulated. My one attempt to call for help brought so much pain that I almost fainted, so I refrained from doing even that, not wanting to bleed out while unconscious. I stayed like that for over an hour, until my body had grown somewhat accustomed to the debilitation. Then I stood, cringing against the only slightly diminished agony, and shedding no small number of tears, and called the police. They came. I was taken to the hospital, and they investigated what they could of my apartment and the evidence therein. I've yet to hear any news of a lead or idea of the perpetrator. They only informed me that the card, the one I'd burned, had been taken into evidence. I was shocked at this, and it must have shown on my face because the officer asked if something was wrong. I asked him how they had recovered the card, given what I'd done, and he said that there wasn't anything wrong with it, that the alleged fire hadn't damaged it at all. An itch in the back of my mind compelled me to ask him another question, even as I grappled to comprehend what he'd told me. What did the card say inside? The officer met my eyes for a moment, a look of slight bewilderment on his face. It said, "I'm glad you're mine." Once I'm well enough to leave the hospital, I'm finding a new place to live. The landlord can have everything in my apartment. I'm never going back there. For the first time in my life, I'm happy I'll be spending Valentine's Day alone. Our first story was by WeirdBryceGuy over on Reddit r/nosleep. What I liked about this story a lot was the fact that you don't exactly know what's going on. Clearly there's just some kind of a crazy woman thing at play. It could be a demon, could be some other kind of spectral entity like a banshee or something like that. It's hard to say. And I think that makes it really interesting, the fact that we still don't exactly know what happened. You know, you just kind of get hints and stuff like that. It's very interesting. You kind of paint your own pictures, but it's still a good level of fear, because you're like, you know, can you really trust everybody that you see out there? Hard to say, right? Hard to say. Very enjoyable story. Let's move on to the next one. The Lover's Locker Escape Room is not for the faint of heart. Can your love survive our lockup? Provide an unforgettable Valentine's Day for that special someone with an evening in our exclusive escape room, where love is put to the ultimate test. Call the Lover's Locker today. The place was brand new. So new that when I went in to get their brochure, I could still smell the fresh paint on the walls. It screamed extravagance. The kind of place that middle-class socialites went to on a date night. So what was a boy from the Bronx doing here with barely $1 to spare? 2 words. Brandy Myers. We'd met only a month before on a dating site, and I wanted to make the jump from swiped right to a relationship status, and this place felt like the right spot to do that. When I texted her just days before Valentine's and asked her if she had plans, I had actually already booked us a room. According to the clerk, they were selling fast, and I didn't want to miss out. None so far, was her response. So I sent her the tickets, and the next thing I knew, she was squealing in my ear over the phone. Babe, I can't believe you booked us that. It looks so classy. You really shouldn't have. Well, I figure maybe it will give us finally a chance to really get to know one another. Make a decision about our future, I told her. Is it going to be just the two of us, or a group thing? How long will it last? I want to have dinner first, is that okay? She had a few other questions that I couldn't answer, but I figured that we would just wing it and see where the night took us. My reservation was at 6 that evening, and I got there a little early with a bouquet of yellow roses, her favorite color. She came dressed in one of the most stunning, tight outfits I've ever seen, and I wrapped my arms around her and leaned in for a kiss. Babe, you know how I feel about PDA. Come on, you're embarrassing me, she giggled. She smelled the roses, and we held hands as we went inside, a small group of other couples waiting eagerly to be told where they would be spending their evening. Cole and Brandy? A bald man called out from the front desk. I raised my hand and we shuffled to the front of the line. You requested the deluxe suite. Right this way, the man said. We were led to a hallway on the left and followed a dark red carpet toward a room marked DXL, where the man provided a few rules. In case of a fire, there is an alarm on the left side of the room, behind the painting, and if at any point you wish for the experience to stop, you simply need to profess your undying love for one another, and we will open the door back before the timer is through. Do you have any questions? He asked. What if we need to pee? I asked, suddenly realizing that I should have done that before we got back here. Ah, yes, of course. Let me show you where the restroom is at. I'll wait, Brandy told me. I went and did my business and hurried back as fast as I could. But my date wasn't in sight. Figuring she had already gone inside, I slipped out the key the man had given me before entering the room. I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting to see on the other side, but it was certainly not this. The room was covered in an ultraviolet light, making every surface seem far more illuminated than normal. Rose petals were scattered across a concrete floor, and long metallic chains draped from the ceiling. The chains meshed together to form a heart, a box of some kind wedged amid the bundle, and what looked like rows of knitting needles poking toward the center table from the bottom of the box. On that table, there were several books, all of which were opened and some had ripped pages, most of which appeared to be arranged in an arrow diagram that pointed toward the left wall. But that part of the room seemed blank. Instead, it was actually the opposite side of the wall that truly captivated my attention. Rows of one-way glass were lined up that reflected everything across the room, except there was one distinction on the other side of the glass, and it made me gasp in shock as I realized Brandy was lying on the ground, covered with blood and petals. Immediately I ran to the mirror, trying to bang on the glass and see if I could get her attention. Yet, instead, the next noise I heard left me in a panic. It was the sound of the door locking. Then a voice came over the sound system. Welcome, esteemed guests, to our deluxe suite. Immediately, I started calling for help. My girlfriend is injured. Get 911. I shouted as I tried to dial myself, only to soon find that cell phone reception was blocked. You'll find that we have taken the steps necessary to provide you the most immersive experience possible connected to your personal love story. The voice droned on as I scrambled to find the picture that the man had said was an emergency release. Yet there was nothing, and the door itself had seemingly disappeared into the wall as if hidden by another trigger. I was locked in, and Brandy was either dead or about to die. If you can unlock the mysteries of each other's heart, you can make it out a better person and a better lover. But if not, you may discover that love itself may be that which tears you apart. The recording concluded. I got down on my knees and tried again to get her attention and see if she was responsive, slamming my fist against the thick glass in frustration. I glanced up at the ceiling and realized that one of the chandeliers above the chains looked like it was a security camera, and I shouted, "Is this your idea of a sick joke, man? My girlfriend is in need of medical attention." There wasn't a response. I went over to the table and tried to flip it in frustration, soon discovering it was bolted to the floor. And then I felt something taped to the bottom. It felt like some kind of tool. Crouching down, I realized that it was a magnifying glass, and I quickly removed its tape before staring at the mix of papers on the table. As I looked through the magnifier, I realized that some of the words on the papers were colored differently. I started to piece them together and try to form a secret message. It felt like it was taking hours as I looked across the glass to where Brandy was lying. I had no way of being sure she was all right, but I knew time was of the essence. It felt like I was racking my brain, trying to figure out the scrambled message. Then I heard the strangest noise coming from the other side of the glass. It sounded like tapping. I stopped what I was doing and went up to it, trying to pay attention to a pattern. Was it Morse code? I tried my hardest to pay attention, but I honestly didn't know a thing about it. Even as it went silent, I suddenly realized that this could be a vital clue that I had just missed. Was Brandy going to be in mortal danger all because I couldn't solve these puzzles? I felt trapped, both literally and figuratively, and in frustration, I went back to the books. Grabbing the first one off of the table, I chucked it at the wall. It fell to the floor and a page stuck to the wall. To my surprise, it was a cipher. I grabbed it and studied the other pages again, realizing I could use it to unscramble the code. S-A-V-E was one word. Panic set in as I tried to understand the rest. Save her, and you save yourself, it read. Did that mean Brandy was still alive? And did that mean I was in danger too? A moment later, the tapping returned, and I realized I might be able to figure out what that meant as well with the cipher. It was a stretch, but maybe the two were connected. As it finished, I managed to write down the one word I was sure that had been sent. Key. There was a physical key somewhere in the room, maybe the way out of here or something else. The question was, where? I got down on the cold floor and pushed petals out of the way, trying to see if maybe the object was hidden somewhere. There were literally thousands of them covering almost every inch of space in the tiny room, but I kept sweeping them aside. Soft music began to play as I pushed more petals out of the way, and I froze when I recognized the song. It was something that Brandy and I had loved on the radio only a week or so before. How the hell did they know that? As the music kept playing and I pushed more petals out of the way, it began to get more and more distorted, until at last it was repetitively playing the same part of the song over and over. Maybe it was another clue? I listened to the lyrics. Never hit so hard in love, Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. Immediately I reached for the chains, tugging on each of them to see if one of them might collapse. The fourth one did, and at the end was in fact a small key, connected directly to the main chain. The box, I realized as I looked up at the intricacies of the hidden puzzle. What else about this room was part of the game? Was this really just a test and none of it real? I heard over the intercom Brandy beginning to gasp for breath, and I saw through the mirror she was beginning to convulse from the shock. Hey, I'm right here. I'll help you. Just hold on, I shouted as I tried to get the key loose from the chain. Instead, I realized I would have to carefully pull the chain toward the box, but it still wouldn't reach. The only way would be to dislodge the box from the needles, I realized. Wrapping my hands with the ripped up paper to protect myself, I began to push at the needles to reach the sides of the box. Even with the added layers of paper, it felt like sharp cuts directly against my wrist, and it took all of my power to not stop. Brandy's gasps were the only thing keeping me going. I know that it was my fault she was in this mess to begin with, and I could hear her now begging for my help. Cole, pull the alarm. Get us out of here, she demanded in desperation. I don't know where it is. There's no portrait on my side, I yelled back as I finally found the strength to push the needles deep into my skin and grab the box. It tugged out rather easily to my surprise, and I managed to unlock it only mere seconds later. I was expecting something inside to help us out of this hell, but instead, as I opened the box, the lights went completely out, preventing me from even seeing inside it. The sound was cancelled too, and I could not hear anything from her side as I scrambled to find my phone. Surely it was somewhere on the table. I fumbled down on the ground and blindly began to search. Then, I heard a roaring noise from below the table, what sounded like a growing furnace. A song by Johnny Cash filled the intercom as I felt warmth beneath my feet and panic set in. Were they really going to burn us alive in here? Cole, I can't move. Help me, I heard Brandy scream over the song. I used the glow from the fire to make my way to the mirror and bang on the glass. I'm trying, babe. Just hold on. The flames were shooting up and melting the table from underneath, causing my makeshift footstool to reach the ceiling to collapse, and the rose petals were acting as an extra flammable material for the growing blaze. I realized as I demanded to get let out. But of course, there was no response. Brandy, I'm sorry about all of this. I love you, I admitted to her. Don't you fucking dare give up. I want to fucking live, she shouted with a whimper. I stood up, braving the inferno and reaching for the box to try and grab whatever was inside. Photographs of the two of us, driving around and making out, trying to just laugh. Had we been stalked by this business? What was all of this? Some of the photos showed either one or the other marked with black permanent marker, and then at the bottom, etched into the box, was a warning. Save yourself or save her. I had to make a choice, but how was I going to save her? I had nothing to give to her. Brandy, I need you to get up, I begged as I pushed my back against the glass wall. She couldn't see me, but I saw she was now scrambling to find a way out of her own prison. I don't understand what's happening, Cole. What is this? She whispered as I saw water was beginning to pour in from the ceiling on her side. Look, I'm probably not going to make it, okay? I think I know what to do to make this thing stop, and I'm really sorry, I said as I covered my mouth, unable to speak. I ran toward the blank wall and started to claw at it, anything to ruin this building. If they wanted me dead, I was going to take them down as much as possible. Instead, as I ripped the wallpaper off, I found what looked like a portrait of myself. I pulled the paper off more to reveal the rest of the painting, stunned by the details to my image. The escape switch, I thought as I pulled it off the wall, and I saw the way out was right in front of me. Then, the lingering question hit me. If I pulled it, did that mean Brandy would die? A message came over the intercom. Congratulations! You found your one true love, yourself! Use the escape lever to end the simulation and rediscover your life, it said in a robotic voice. At the same time, Brandy was desperate to stay above water on the side of her prison, and if I pulled it, I imagined she would likely drown. There were probably a dozen excuses I could have used to save myself, to let her go. I didn't really know this girl. Didn't know if we were going to work out or not. Heck, after this hell, if I were her, I would definitely dump me, I thought sourly. But I told myself I had to save her instead. The wall! Rip off the wallpaper! I shouted to her as the flames licked against my skin. She heard me and didn't hesitate, jumping through the rising water to scratch at the different wallpaper. Love is blind, and love cannot exist without first there being selfishness, the intercom announced as Brandy gasped for air. You can do it! Come on! I shouted. I saw bits and pieces of the portrait show up. Pull the lever! I told her desperately. Both of us were moments away from death. She turned toward me and demanded, You do yours too, right? You're there too, right? I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized she was breaking the escape room rules. They said either one or the other. We can't both go, I insisted. Fuck it, Cole. Fuck the rules. Pull the damn lever on 3, she demanded. 1, 2. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the ground in a back alley. It felt like I had been hit by a freight train. My clothes still smelled of fire. I knew that it had all been true. I tried to call Brandy but couldn't get through. I stumbled out of the alley and called a cab, getting to her house in about 10 minutes. They had dropped me off on the south side of town, with little more than the clothes on my back. I ran to her door and slammed my fist against it. She had already made it home and looked just as shaken as me. Brandy, I'm so sorry about all of this, I stuttered. Her glare told me that any chance I had at a second date was gone. I don't know what you did to provide that place all the intimate details about my life, but you were sick. That place was a nightmare, Cole. We almost died. I didn't do anything. They must have been monitoring us, I insisted. All the more reason to not be together. I can't live like that, she argued. You have to believe me that I didn't know this would happen, I admitted. She crossed her arms uncomfortably. There was something that she wasn't telling me. When I went in the room, I wasn't alone, Cole. Not at first, she explained. Someone stabbed you, right? Did you see their face? It was you, she whispered. The air around us felt colder as she explained. But somehow, I knew it wasn't you. I can't explain it, but I played along. This other you gave me a warning about the escape room. It's meant to be a representation of how our relationship will go. And if that's true, I just can't get hurt again, she admitted. I don't understand. What you're saying isn't possible, I said, my throat feeling dry. Is anything we experienced tonight? She snapped back. Just go home, Cole. Leave me alone. I tried to go back to the escape room today to complain to the management and maybe get answers, but the building was already being stripped apart. Moving on to the next town, one worker explained. Or more likely, covering their tracks, I thought. I don't fully understand what we experienced or what was real about this hell. Was the escape room an illusion or a vision of my future with Brandy? For now, I can only view her from afar, wondering if the game of love I played was worth it. Our second story is by ColourBlindness from Reddit r/NoSleep. It's weird, right? How escape rooms are both this amazing idea of like, ooh, puzzle rooms and everything, and they can have themes and stuff. It's quite fun, and then you can also have the more horrifying side, like there's a couple of films about that, for example. I think maybe even a TV show or two. Hard to say. I don't exactly know, but it's very interesting, the idea of like a more horrifying escape room where people die and stuff. But the fact that it's also tied into Valentine's Day, it's like a double whammy at the same time, right? Because you can either forge your relationship or you can break it. It was weird. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the premise. I enjoyed like a lot of the gripping parts of the story, but I don't exactly know. Kind of like what else. I feel like there was maybe a little bit deeper thought going behind it that maybe my brain is just too stupid to comprehend. If I'm being totally honest. But I enjoyed it as a story. I thought the idea was very fun. And I hope you did too. So that wraps it up here for Valentine's Day. I really hope you've enjoyed yourself, because I know I sure have. And we'll see you for whatever's next. Take care.